5. We're tackling Think Again by Adam Grant today.
Yeah, we've got some really interesting excerpts from his audiobook up on YouTube.
All about the art of changing your mind and
And the science behind it?
exactly. And sometimes
It's harder than it sounds.
it really is. In fact, Grant starts with this story about Stephen Greenspan.
Oh, yeah.
He's an expert in gullibility.
Right.
And he lost a bunch of his retirement savings in a Ponzi scheme.
Of all things.
Talk about irony.
It's like the perfect example
Yeah.
of what Grant calls these preacher, prosecutor, politician modes of thinking.
Okay, so we're all probably guilty of this at some point, but
At some point, yeah, for sure.
break it down for me. What do these modes even mean?
So think about it, like when you're in preacher mode, you're so convinced you're right. You're trying to convert everyone else.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's prosecutor mode, where you're just like laser focused on picking apart everyone else's arguments. And then you've got politician mode, where you just want to be liked and you're seeking approval.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Even if it means compromising what you actually believe.
I'm seeing myself in all three of these,
Mhm.
and not in a good way.
Yeah, it's pretty relatable, I think, for most of us.
So I wonder if there's a better way to approach decisions.
Well, Grant suggests this scientist mode of thinking.
No.
So instead of, defending our opinions as if they're these fortresses,
Yeah,
we treat them more like hypotheses to be tested.
I like that.
We look for evidence that might prove us wrong
Interesting.
and embrace doubt as a path to understanding more.
So instead of asking, why am I right?
You ask, what if I'm wrong?
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of something Greenspan said after that whole Madoff thing.
Oh, yeah.
He said, I was caught in the same trap I teach about. The trap is thinking you're immune.
Which is so true.
Right.
None of us are immune to these biases.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to cultivate this scientist thinking.
So it's kind of like a...
It's like a healthy skepticism,
Yeah.
Not just about other people's ideas,
Right.
but our own as well.
Okay, so scientist mode sounds great in theory,
Right?
but how do we actually,
Put it into practice.
yeah, it can't be as simple as just telling our brains to be more scientific.
No, definitely not. But it's more about developing certain habits and practices.
Okay.
So like next time you're in a discussion and you find yourself really passionately defending some belief,
Mm-hmm.
just hit pause for a second and ask yourself, what evidence would actually prove me wrong?
Ooh.
Or what other explanations haven't I considered?
I'm writing those down.
Good ones to remember.
It seems like the key is to detach our egos from our opinions a little bit.
Detached, yeah, which is easier said than done.
Well, for sure.
But Grant shares this study of Italian startups, and the entrepreneurs who were trained in scientific thinking were twice as successful.
Wait, seriously?
Yeah,
Just from changing their thinking?
it seems that way.
So how did that actually play out in their businesses?
Well, they were more willing to pivot when they realized their initial strategy just wasn't working.
Okay.
They didn't see those setbacks as failures.
Interesting.
They saw them as data,
Ah.
opportunities to learn and adapt.
So it's counterintuitive because we're told to never give up.
Right.
But sometimes
Sometimes you have to.
you have to know when to fold them.
Exactly. And being wrong is seen as such a weakness.
Yeah.
But in reality, that ability to change course and adapt,
Especially in today's world.
especially today, yeah, it's so valuable.
It's like rethinking becomes a competitive advantage almost.
Yeah, I like that.
So it's not just about avoiding mistakes.
Right.
It's about unlocking potential.
Totally.
But how do we find that sweet spot between confidence and humility?
Well, Grant calls it confident humility.
Okay.
It sounds a little contradictory,
Yes.
but it's a powerful concept.
Lay it on me.
So it's basically believing in your ability to learn and grow,
Okay.
but at the same time acknowledging that your current knowledge and tools might be flawed.
Right. So you're capable, but you still have so much to learn.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
Is there a real world example of this?
Yeah, Grant talks about Hella Thomasdottir.
Okay.
She went from feeling like an imposter to running for president of Iceland.
Wow.
Talk about a confidence boost.
Did she win?
She didn't win, but she came incredibly close.
Wow.
She actually did better than a former prime minister.
That's amazing.
So it's a great example of how doubting your experience doesn't have to mean doubting your potential.
I'm already rethinking some of my own limitations here.
See? It's working already.
It is. What could we all achieve if we had a little bit more of that confident humility?
Who knows? The possibilities are endless, really.
It's interesting, though, how we're always told to believe in ourselves.
Right.
But, what if part of that is being okay with being wrong sometimes?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure.
It is. Grant dives into the psychology of being wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We usually see it as a bad thing,
a negative.
But he actually talks about the potential joy in discovering our mistakes.
Yeah, I love that part.
Wait, hold on. Joy and being wrong.
Don't usually go together.
Like, who enjoys being wrong?
Well, Grant brings up Daniel Kahneman,
Oh, yeah?
Nobel Prize-winning psychologist.
Okay.
And he was actually delighted when she found out some of his hypotheses were wrong.
Why would he be happy about that?
Well, for him, it meant getting closer to the truth.
Ah.
It was like a sign of progress in understanding how our minds work.
So being wrong isn't a failure.
Right.
It's a step toward understanding.
Exactly.
But the problem is we attach our identities to our opinions.
We do.
So when someone challenges our beliefs...
It feels like a personal attack.
Right.
And we get defensive instead of curious.
Like that quote.
Yeah.
When the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir?
Easier said than done, though.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Grant compares Kahneman to Ted Kaczynski.
Oh, wow.
The Unabomber.
That's a pretty stark contrast.
It is.
Because Kaczynski couldn't rethink his beliefs at all. And that's a really chilling example of what can happen.
It makes you think.
It does.
So how do we become more like Kahneman and less like...
Less like Kaczynski, yeah.
How can we cultivate that joy of being wrong?
I think a good starting point is just realizing we're all wrong about things all the time.
Oh, yeah.
We misplace our keys.
All the time.
Forget appointments.
Yep.
Misjudge situations.
It's part of being human.
Exactly.
So we should see those everyday mistakes.
Yeah.
Not as personal failings, but
as opportunities.
to learn.
To learn and adjust. Yeah.
And I guess you could even make it fun.
You could?
Keep track of your predictions and see how often you're right or wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Turn it into a little experiment.
I like that.
See how self-aware you are.
Okay, so let's say we've gotten over this need to be right all the time.
Okay.
How do we actually have disagreements productively?
That's a good question.
Because so often,
It just turns into an argument.
yeah, everyone just digs in their heels.
Right. Well, that's why it's more about having better arguments,
Okay.
not just more arguments. And Grant uses this example of a debate between Harish Natarajan,
Okay.
who's a world champion debater, and IBM's AI.
What?
It's called Project Debater.
So it was like man versus machine.
Exactly.
We won.
Harish won.
Wow.
But what's interesting is how he did it.
Okay.
He found common ground with the AI,
Okay.
asked these really thought-provoking questions, and he just focused on a few key points.
Instead of overwhelming the audience with data,
Exactly.
it shows that effective communication is about connecting with the other side,
It really is.
not just having the loudest voice.
or the most data. It's
Yeah.
about connecting. Yeah.
So next time I'm in a disagreement, I should try and really listen.
try listening. Yeah.
Ask open-ended questions and see their point of view.
You might even change your own mind.
It's true, you never know.
You never know.
So we've talked about changing our own minds.
Oh.
But what about like prejudice and stereotypes?
Yeah, those are much harder to shift.
They are. But Grant tells this story about Daryl Davis,
Oh, I love this story.
a black musician who befriended members of the Ku Klux Klan.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
I know.
That sounds a little risky.
Yeah.
But he wanted to understand them.
To break down those barriers
Exactly.
through conversation.
Just by talking to them.
Wow. And did it work?
It's amazing it actually worked.
Really?
Yeah, he's convinced dozens of KKK members to abandon their hate.
Oh.
Some even left the organization entirely.
It's a powerful example.
The power of dialogue.
How change is possible, even in the most seemingly hopeless situations.
Yeah. So for those times when we do want to encourage change in someone,
Right.
Grant talks about this technique called motivational interviewing.
Oh, yeah.
What is that?
So instead of trying to force change on someone, you guide them to kind of discover it themselves.
Okay.
Ask open-ended questions.
Mm-hmm.
Listen reflectively. Help them figure out their own motivations for change.
I bet that's really effective.
It is.
Grant uses this example of Marie Helen,
Oh, yeah.
a mother who didn't want to vaccinate her kids.
Right.
And she met this doctor who used motivational interviewing.
And it changed everything.
I'm guessing he didn't just lecture her about vaccines?
No, not at all.
What did he do?
He asked her questions, acknowledged her fears, and helped her explore her own values.
So it wasn't about external pressure.
No.
It was about her realizing it for herself.
Exactly.
Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
Listener, have you ever tried to force someone to change their mind?
Yeah. Think about that for a second.
Maybe this technique could lead to a better conversation.
Definitely.
And speaking of creating environments for change,
Yes.
Grant takes us inside NASA,
Oh, yeah?
where rethinking became super important
Essential.
after the Columbia disaster.
Right.
That was,
And devastating.
it was. So how did they respond to that?
Well, they knew they had to do some serious soul searching. They realized that a culture of complacency had contributed to the accident.
So how did they change things?
They actually made rethinking a core value.
Interesting.
Ellen Ochoa,
Okay.
the first Hispanic woman in space.
Wow.
She helped create a culture of psychological safety.
So people felt comfortable speaking up,
Exactly.
asking tough questions.
Challenging assumptions, yeah.
That's great. I've heard about her "how do you know"
Yeah.
question.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't that become like a mantra at NASA?
It did. It's such a simple but effective way to encourage deeper thinking.
And I guess that leads to process accountability.
Which is another thing NASA adopted.
So it's not just about rewarding positive outcomes.
Right.
It's about evaluating how decisions are made.
The process itself.
So even if a decision leads to a bad outcome,
Mm-hmm.
if the process was good, it's still considered a success.
In a way, yeah, because it means you've learned something.
That's a really cool way to look at it.
It is.
Not about blaming individuals, but
Creating systems for learning and growth.
yeah, could this apply to other organizations,
Absolutely.
even outside of NASA?
Think about your own workplace.
Yeah.
How could you encourage more rethinking?
How do you know?
Huh.
Questions could we all be asking?
Exactly. It's about challenging the status quo.
It's amazing how rethinking applies to everything.
It really does.
We've talked about business relationships, even NASA.
Yeah, it's pretty versatile.
But what about our personal lives?
Our own goals and all that.
Yeah. Does rethinking have a role there too?
Definitely. Grant talks about this thing called identity foreclosure.
Okay.
It's when we commit to a path too early, like a career or a relationship.
Without really exploring other options.
Exactly. We kind of box ourselves in.
Oh, I totally get that. In my 20s, I felt this pressure to have it all figured out.
Yeah.
The perfect job, the perfect partner, the perfect life plan.
It's a lot of pressure.
It was. But the thing is,
Mhm.
our values and interests, they change as we get older.
All the time.
Right. So how do we avoid this identity foreclosure trap?
Well, we don't just wander aimlessly.
Okay, go.
Grant suggests these planned checkups.
Plan checkups.
Yeah, it's like going to the doctor even when you feel fine.
Okay.
You take the time to step back and assess.
See if you're still on the right track.
Exactly, if it still aligns with your values.
I like that analogy. Have you ever felt trapped by a past decision, listener?
Yeah, maybe a career choice you made.
Or a relationship that isn't working anymore?
It might be time for a planned checkup.
It could be eye-opening. And speaking of eye-opening,
Mm-hmm.
Grant challenges this idea that happiness is the ultimate goal.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Isn't pursuing happiness like a fundamental human right?
It's definitely ingrained in our culture.
It is. But Grant says there's research that suggests...
Directly pursuing happiness might actually make us less happy.
Wait, really?
Mm-hmm.
How does that even work?
One theory is that when we're constantly chasing happiness, we become super aware of when we're not happy.
So we're focused on the negative,
In a way, yeah, we're magnifying those moments of sadness.
instead of just enjoying the ride.
Right, and we might also be overemphasizing pleasure.
At the expense of meaning.
Exactly, we chase these fleeting moments of joy instead of doing things that give our lives depth.
I've definitely been guilty of that. But think about those times when you're totally absorbed in something, maybe a challenging project or a hobby you love.
Yeah, you're not thinking about happiness then.
Right. You're just in the flow.
And you feel this deep sense of satisfaction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's about finding meaning.
In our actions, yeah.
And that meaning doesn't have to come from these huge life changes.
No, it can be in the everyday things.
Grant talks about Candace Walker,
Oh, yeah.
a hospital custodian who went above and beyond for cancer patients.
She brought them comfort and laughter.
It's such a powerful reminder that we can all make a difference.
We can.
No matter what our job is or our circumstances.
It's about rethinking our daily actions, finding ways to contribute.
And infusing our lives with meaning.
Exactly.
Wow, what an incredible deep dive.
It was a good one.
We've covered so much ground today.
From business to space to our own personal growth.
And the key takeaway is that rethinking is a skill.
A skill we can all develop.
We just have to ask the tough questions, challenge assumptions, and be open to changing our minds.
And remember, sometimes being wrong is the first step to a better understanding.
So listener, what beliefs are you holding on to that might need some rethinking?
What possibilities could open up if you dared to change your mind?
The world needs more rethinking, and that starts with each of us.
It does.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep those minds open and curious.